Hey, and welcome back to the Flow Show. I'm Joanna Turner, intuitive business mentor, and I'm really excited for this week's episode. It feels like this story has been brewing, it's been wanting to come through, and I'm just trusting my intuition and the flow of what is wanting to come through in the podcast and for the episodes, and just allowing that to be the way it is. There is not a huge plan involved in this or really anything I do. So here goes nothing. Anyway, no, on the last episode, I dived into the Akashic Records, what they are, how they work, and I shared a few stories and examples. But I really this story was wanting to come through, but it felt a little bit like the episode was already far too long. So we cut it short. And I'm going to share it today. And we'll get into that in just a few minutes. The other thing that I wanted to mention in some of the episodes, we've talked a bit about planetary grid work and feeling called to go to different places and ley lines and sort of doing this healing work, and sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And this weekend, I was invited through to my sister's, and we were taking my little nephew skiing, and we'd managed to not book lift passes in time, which actually worked out really well because we really needed one of us at the top of the slope helping him get his skis on, and the other one at the bottom sort of trying to catch him. But he was just loving it, and it was his first time on snow, and he's been having dry ski lessons all week, which is lovely. But the reason I'm mentioning this is that on the weekend it was the full moon. So this is the 15th February. It was that I'm recording this. The full moon was, I think, the 10th, 11th. No, new moon, sorry, big new moon. And it was also the beginning of it was the Chinese New Year, the beginning of the year of the wood dragon. So it's a really big weekend of energy and a really beautiful time to sort of feel a renewed energy for the start of the year. I think some people have been feeling a bit sticky, like they hadn't quite got going, and really that beautiful new moon has sort of kick-started things afresh for us, which is just lovely. And there was a lot of energy coming through on the Schumann resonance. And some people were having sort of struggle sleeping, and there's still quite a lot of energy coming through. This is the 15th I'm recording this, and there was a huge pulse yesterday. I suppose Valentine's Day, all the love, maybe that's what was going on. But there was a big pulse came through, and yeah, the energy has been intense. But the reason I'm just mentioning this before we get stuck into the Akashic Records story is on my way to my sister's driving there, I passed Roslyn Chapel. And I have mentioned this before because I sort of forget that it's even there every time, but um, it keeps drawing me back. And my sister lives very near it, just outside Edinburgh. So on this big new moon, on the Chinese New Year, for some reason, I feel like we chose that weekend for my sister to invite me through for a couple of nights, because I think part of the reason, yes, we were having fun on the ski slopes, but part of the reason was I think my energy needed to be on the rose line of Roslyn Chapel this weekend for that energy to be seeded through me in whatever way that works. I don't really fully understand how all that works, but I just knew as I was driving to her house, I was like, oh, it's another auspicious date, because it feels like the times when I'm through at my sister's, it's usually on an auspicious date. My little nephew, I think I shared in one of the episodes, his birthday is on the summer solstice. And so we're usually through for his birthday on the solstice. And that just happens to be really near Roslyn Chapel. And I've been there with him when he was a baby. I've done some crystal grid work there in Roslyn Chapel, and also had a visit there with my dad, which was very highly unusual that would have happened. So quite a lot seems to happen for me around there. And yeah, I just thought it'd be interesting because we're talking a little bit about the grid work and the flow and where we're pulled to. And I just thought it was interesting on such a sort of auspicious date to be there. So that was lovely. All right, so let's dive into this story. It's a client of mine. We worked together quite a number of years ago, and I want to be clear that we worked together for about 6 months. So while an Akashic Records reading can be transformative as a one off, absolutely, we can get a lot of work done in an hour and really dig deep and get you some direction and some clarity and awareness and a plan, and even manage to heal some trauma in that time, or whatever is going on, whatever is in your highest and best. This client, we did work together for about 6 months, and in that time we also did a full day one-on-one VIP day in person together. So we did a lot of work together. This was not just the result of one session, although the main part of the story was one session in particular, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'd like to think sometimes it can be, you can feel quite a miraculous shift with the Akashic Records, but I do want to just state that she did put the work in over 6 months, was open to it, and obviously kept doing the work and showing up for herself after that as well. So just to be clear, this beautiful lady came to me, and I don't think she maybe quite knew what she was letting herself in for. In terms of the deep inner work that we ended up doing. I think uh, it was a sort of, obviously, a business mentorship, but also I do the inner work and the Akashic Records, and so that had a big part in our journey as well. But anyway, I believe if you're attracted to this work, you get what you need at the right time, and it was a big turning point in her journey, and I believe the work was perfect for her in that moment. So when this client showed up, she was already successful, wonderful person, of course. But she was, her business big goal that she wanted to work with me on was to get herself over $1 million in revenue. And I think she was in the high sort of 800s-ish area, but she had not been able to crack the $1 million. And for some people, that is quite an upper limit to get there. I think she'd even maybe been close to it a couple of years in a row and just hadn't been able to get over that number. And so it can feel, I think Tony Robbins even said once that he had got to, once he got to $1 million, he was there for 3 years and couldn't get any higher. Just mentally, he'd sort of created this limit for himself. So it's called upper limiting, and she was basically upper limiting and not quite allowing herself to get there. And that was one of the things she wanted to work on. I said, that is wonderful. Happy to do that. So I said, but of course, as the coach, um, I'm not just about the money. Like, it's important, yes, but at the same time, at what cost? So I said, tell me about the rest of your life. Are you happy? And basically, at the time, she was really stretched thin, overworked, not spending enough time with her kids, not spending enough time with her husband, not making time to get to the gym. She had a few health concerns, and just really, really stretched thin. They were also doing a home renovation, and just a million things going on, loads of clients, and there was just really uh, really in a place where something had to change, right? But she also came with this big other goal. I said, what else are we aiming for? And she's like, I want to do 2 million in revenue. I said, okay, great. But the problem was that she was already stretched things, struggling, and not particularly happy, and life wasn't going amazing at where she was at. And while, again, I'm all for big goals and getting people to where they want to be, it somehow, there was just something that wasn't quite making sense. Like, we needed I needed more context. Anyway, we dug deeper into that goal, and really it was more about, for some reason in her head, she thought she had to get to that number to, I think it was a goal to make her father proud or happy, sort of thing. So it wasn't really her goal to get to the 2 million. Um, because she already was struggling with just getting to the 1 million, but she just felt that that was a sort of external driver that wasn't really her goal and right for her in that moment. So quite often, if I have a client who's struggling to get to a goal, we look at what is driving that. Whose goal is it really? I've had other clients, it was a house or whatever, and that was really the mother's goal for them. And in their life and in their story, that really was more like a 3 to 5 year goal, not a this year goal. You know what I mean? So sometimes we've just got to be careful about who are these goals for? Are they for ourselves? Is that really um in our highest best for ourselves in that moment? So we obviously had a look at that, and she also wanted to um be more visible, be more public with her business. She wanted to be recognized and sort of enter competitions and get awards for her work, which she was already doing amazing work, but she'd never felt confident enough to do that. She had quite a bit of imposter syndrome, and there were some other things going on. She wanted to get a TV show, but she was really keeping herself small and didn't want to be visible, partly because of this imposter syndrome. So there was lots of other things going on as well, but they were the sort of main tracks and themes that we wanted to work on. And one of the things that came up when we started working with the Akashic Records was to really look into this area of her not or feeling so stretched thin. So she had assistants, she had people helping her in the business, but she was often hiring the wrong people. And she thought she was making a good hire, and then they would turn out to be not quite right for the job, not quite right for the position. And she was really struggling to just feel to get the right people to do the right things. And when she would bring the people in, she felt like she didn't have the time to really onboard them properly. She's so busy and running around doing a million things. And that was really, really challenging for her. And then sometimes they just wouldn't quite live up to the expectations. And obviously, she liked things done a certain way, and she just didn't quite feel like any of these people she was hiring over a number of years were doing it well enough, properly, that kind of thing. And so she ended up doing most of the work herself, and they weren't as helpful as they really could be. And obviously she's paying their salaries, and that's another stress on her. So that was a big theme. And obviously she was not consciously hiring people that weren't qualified or weren't a right fit for the role or the business. It wasn't something she was choosing, right? Obviously, she thought she was making a good hire, but this stuff goes really deep. This was subconscious decisions, because ultimately she didn't really want to let go of control, and she didn't really want anybody else doing the thing, right? So we had to figure that out and understand that it wasn't just she was looking in the wrong place. And obviously we had conversations about where she was hiring, what she was putting in her ads, systems, the way her systems and her what do you call them? Oh my god, SOPs, standard operating procedures, were set up in her business, things like that. So we had a conversation about the business strategy side of hiring people and hiring the right people, and maybe doing personality tests and all this kind of stuff. So we'd had this sort of strategy conversation about it, as you might imagine. But there was something deeper going on, right? So I knew that there was something like subconscious and a layer deeper. And this story takes us to a crazy place that there is no way I could have imagined or figured this out, right? So even though I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of women, and I think I know what the answer is, and I probably could, guess it right 9 times out of 10, or know exactly what the best thing for us to work on is. I love working with the Akashic Records because it can often give us a higher perspective and a higher viewpoint to see the situation or the issue from a completely different perspective and point of view. So the other thing I always ask when I go into the records is, what can we work on that will have the highest impact and get us to the absolute root cause of what is causing the sort of chaos in this person's life, to get them the best results as quickly as possible. So that is part of the intention I set when I'm working with people, especially around their business. So I want to get to the root cause as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So that was great. I also mentioned she was having a renovation in her home, and she was really struggling with letting her husband help her. He, I think, had gone in and packed up a whole bunch of boxes and moved them somewhere, and she had totally flipped out. And she said to me, she was like, I totally overreacted. I don't really understand why, but I can't receive help from my husband like that either. And I said, right, that's fine. Let's open the records and see what's going on here, and we'll get you some answers, right? That was our intention. So um we go in and we start working through this, and I take her, and one of the things that I do that's a bit different from most people that work with the Akashic Records is I combine it with other modalities that I love working with, and one of them is timeline work. So I do that a lot, and it is just makes the timeline work that you can do without the Akashic Records, but when you combine them, woo, things go bananas, and people are able to go much deeper. We have like just the most profound, crazy explorations into people's timelines, whether that is ancestral or past life, like I mentioned in the last episode. So if you want a bit more information on how that works, definitely check out the last episode. So as we go on this exploration back in time, back to the most important place that we need to go to get to the root cause of this, she says to me, "Oh, I'm on a boat." And I was like, "Okay." And she was like, I think I was on the Titanic." And I was like, "Okay." And as anyone that says anything to me, I just go, "Okay." I just assume that that's what's happening, and we roll with it. Like, people come up with some stuff, and you just trust and roll with it. So I said, "Okay." She said, I think I'm in a lifeboat." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Are you wet or dry?" And she said, "I'm dry." I said, "Okay." And so we started going through the process and talking to her about why she'd been taken into this lifetime. We made sure she was safe, and what was the learnings she needed, and all this kind of stuff. It was just a guided process that we went through while we were in the Akashic Records. And one of the things that she realized was that when the Titanic went down, she'd obviously been on it, moving to in this past life, going to America, and all of her belongings had been on the ship and they had sunk, and she'd lost everything. And she was like, she could just see so clearly that it was such a trauma for her to be sort of left with absolutely nothing. And some of her control issues were stemming from the fact that she had lost everything. So she just didn't want to sort of give anyone else power over her belongings, her business, um, because she had this underlying fear that she might lose everything if she sort of gives over control to somebody else, and um and she was going to lose everything. So it's this underlying energy of, if I'm not fully in charge of my things, I can lose everything. And so what often happens is if we tie something up, so we worked through everything around that event in her life, around this memory of being on the Titanic, we wrapped all that up. And as we come back up along the timeline, we look for other events that have that same energy. Now, clearing the first instance, the one that happened first, might clear everything on your timeline. That whole energy might be just gone within an instant. You don't have to work on every single incident or every time that she felt she had controlled things in her whole life. Like, we don't need to go in and work on everything. We work on the first one, the most important one, the place where it started, right? The root cause. And then there might be a couple other significant ones along the way that we just want to look at and resolve and make sure they are completely cleared and healed, to make sure that the current situation and that she stops creating the same issue and the same pattern in her life going forward. So we ended up jumping forward into her childhood. She was under 8, I think. This is from a few years ago, so just trying to remember, but definitely in very formative years of her development as a child. Her parents were going through a divorce, and her dad packed up all of their stuff when they were at school one day, or had movers come in and move all of their stuff, all of their belongings to the new house. But her box of belongings had been lost. And there was nothing else was lost, just her special box of her toys and the things that were most precious to her didn't make it in the trip, right? So there is this very clear same energy, right? When she is not in control of her life, right? She's not in control of what happens in her parents' marriage. She's at school, and all of her most precious belongings disappear. And so in this lifetime, she's experienced that same trauma. And as a child, that would be awful. Like, if maybe the one thing she would want was her favorite teddy or whatever, and that would have been okay. She could have lost her clothes, but this was her special, box of her most precious things. And so in this lifetime, that same issue had been perpetuating itself. And she had created, again, in this life, a belief around my things, if they're entrusted to other people to move or take care of, I lose everything. And a lot of therapy or some healing modalities might have just looked at the incident in this lifetime, the thing that happened to her in her childhood, which would have been fine, but it might not have fully cleared the issue for her going forward if they hadn't gone that one step deeper into the past life connection. So I think it's really important to do both. We often find that just clearing the past life isn't quite enough. We do have to look at the childhood, but everyone's different. Every case is different. Every, occurrence is different. So we clear that in the childhood and, sort of wrap it up, create a new belief. We, integrate it and bring her back into the here and now, and we get other messages from the Akashic Records, and we can see the dynamics and how the same energy had been from her past life had been created in this lifetime, and then it was happening in her business and going forward, and it was happening in her marriage. And so we could see all these dynamics very, very clearly. And therefore she was able to then take this new energy, the healed energy, into her business. And the next person she was able to hire was the right person. It was somebody who had the right skills. She wasn't subconsciously sabotaging herself and her business anymore, trying to control everything so as she wouldn't lose everything, right? So it seems a bit, if this is the first time you've sort of heard this stuff, it can seem totally wild, but you can also be like, I can see why that would be important to heal for her and why it's important for her to work on that stuff. So long story short, during this 6-month period, I checked in with her. I said, hey, by the way, did you cross that $1 million mark, this sort of big goal that she had never been able to quite hit? And she was like, oh my gosh, yes, we crossed that like a month ago. And I was like, wait, what? You didn't even tell me? And so it was important, but it also wasn't important, right? All this other stuff was the important stuff. She'd brought on a great new hire. She was able to delegate. She was more trusting, all of this kind of stuff. So she sailed over that, but she hadn't really celebrated it. And I am all about celebrating the wins. It really helps our subconscious have something more to work towards, right? If she's been trying to work towards this goal for years to get to this thing, and then it happens and she doesn't even acknowledge it or mark it, it's a bit sad. Anyway, I sent her a lovely bottle of champagne, and she was able to celebrate with her team on a Friday. So it's very important to celebrate these things. And not only did she pass that figure, she did it with the help, right? With getting better help, being more trusting, with more ease, and everything else started falling into place. So interestingly, in a follow-up call, maybe a few weeks later, she said, "You'll never guess what." And I said, "Of course, what?" And she said, "Well, the funniest thing is I've always had this fear of boats." And she said, "I've never really thought about it, and I would have never come to you uh, to help me with my fear of boats." And I went, "Yeah, I can understand that, right?" We were doing business mentoring, and it's not something that was bothering her in her life. She just had this fear of boats, and she said, "I've never been on a cruise." I said, "Okay." And they were supposed to be going, the other thing, she hadn't been on holiday for ages. She was supposed to be going on holiday to Bali, and they had finally booked something, got it in the diary. She felt like she could go. It was all great. But there was a volcanic eruption on Bali, and there was lots of smoke. And so a lot of flights were cancelled in and out of Bali, and she couldn't travel to Bali. She said, "You'll never guess what." I turned to my husband and said, "Why don't we go on a cruise?" And he was like, "What? You hate boats? You're scared of boats? You've never wanted to go on a cruise? That's insane." Um, and she went, "Do you know what? I'm ready. I really want to do that." And they ended up, instead of flying to Bali, they booked a cruise and had a wonderful holiday on a cruise ship, right? That she'd never ever been on, because she had this underlying fear, which of course was valid. If you've been on the Titanic, you do not want to necessarily, go on your holidays on a cruise ship. So by looking at that, we sort of healed this other unconscious part that that allowed her to then open up to the possibility of going on a different holiday. Of course, you might not ever have gone to work with somebody for that specifically if it wasn't bothering you in your life, but it was a nice little side benefit of the work we did together. The other things that have happened since, she did get the TV show. She's won a number of awards, and really just doing amazing and really shining, and spending more time with her family, and just absolutely living her best life. So it's a uh, bit of a random story, but I think you'll be able to understand the importance of this work, and the impact it can then have on life, and like that knock-on effect. We really needed to work on those underlying beliefs, the lack of control. She would never have hit 2 million if she was trying to do everything herself, if she couldn't get good staff in place, right? She would never have got to that big goal. And then the more she tried to get there, but she didn't have the capacity to get there, you can spiral down. You can feel bad about yourself. If you lose confidence, or lose the will to keep going for bigger, different goals. So I believe that the more that we grow and we scale our businesses, it's really a lesson in growing ourselves, our capacity to receive, to trust, to surrender, to let go of control, to have other people help us. Building a team is no mean feat. I've been through many, many different situations with that as well, so I can understand. But it's just, yeah, a massive growth edge, and she did amazing. So that was my story, and um yeah, just one of the ways that I help people, because sometimes I find it's so difficult to articulate what it is I do, or how I help people. Like, her work, her marriage is improved, her, relationship with her kids is improved, her health improved, um, her enjoyment in her business is improved. There's so many different facets that all came together, and it's maybe not necessarily what she thought she was signing up for at the beginning, but ultimately it's exactly what she needed, right? Anyway, so I do work with clients. I do have some space for some one-on-ones at the moment. And if working with me to help grow yourself, to grow your business is something that you might enjoy, you're welcome to book a free consultation with me. We'll put the link in the show notes, and it's just a no obligation call. We talk about your goals, what's holding you back. We see if we vibe, if we're if we're a good fit to work together. If you are going to work with somebody for some months, then you obviously want to have some rapport and connection. And um, I want to feel like I can definitely help you and make a difference in what's going on in your life. So if that is of interest, you're welcome to book in for that free consultation. The other options, I do one-off readings, healings. They are an hour, and we get a lot covered in that time. But obviously, with the understanding that I can't fix every one of your problems in an hour, but I will absolutely do my best to get to the root of some of the things holding you back, or answer some of those key questions in your life, whether it's relationship dynamics or to do with your business or whatever that might look like. It really can be quite wide ranging. The other really cool thing I love doing with people is a half day VIP intensive. And it just means you get my eyes on your business. We can do a full review of everything and just really check in with your business strategy, your pricing, your packages. Is it all making sense? What's going on with the energetics of your business, with yourself? Really find your any of your biggest blocks. We can clear those and really get you shifting and really clear with a really clear plan for moving forward, with a lot more ease, which I'm all about these days. And finally, what is the other little offering we have? Oh yeah, you can learn to read your own Akashic records. So I personally struggle a little bit more to listen to my own. I can, obviously, and that's how I first started out, and that's how everyone has to start out. But the sometimes you can obviously learn to open your own records and hear what you need to hear, and then that's level 1 that I teach, and then level 2 is reading the records for other people. So sometimes even my people that have gone through all 3 levels of my trainings, and they still come back for a little reading or a healing or some guidance, a little top up. uh, Sometimes if we're too in our own stuff, it's a bit hard to get the clarity you need for yourself. It's a lot easier to get really clear, unmuddied information sometimes for others, right? Because you have your preference, you have your ideas of how things work and operate, and it's just sometimes easier to um, deliver it for other people, or have somebody else hold the space for you as well, which is always lovely. And there's a depth that you can really get to when somebody else is holding the space for you in that way. So it's really a beautiful thing to learn. It's a beautiful thing to experience, and something that can be integrated in with the rest of your work. So I often, the records hold all information of all souls and businesses, and uh through all time and space and dimensions, and through the past, the present, and the future. Like, everything you need is in there. And it is quite miraculous to experience the depth of what is there. I once had this girl who was also an Akashic Records reader. And when I first started, she booked a session with me, and she had also been a client. And she was really, I think, testing to see if I was a good Akashic Records reader, because she'd had a reading with somebody else and had her business planned out with somebody else, talking about launching her business, launch dates, pricing, all that kind of stuff. And she was asking me the same questions. Obviously, I didn't know that at the time, but I was bringing through some pricing for her packages and her things that she was going to be selling, and they were exactly the same as this other reader that she'd gone to, down to the dollar. And she then shared with me afterwards, like, "Oh, yeah, you are on point." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize I was being tested. I thought I was helping you and doing this reading for you." But yeah, she was subtly just testing my metal to see if I was my readings were on point. So uh yeah, I don't really didn't really massively appreciate that, but I was secretly quite chuffed that I was on the money, literally down to the dollar. So anyway, that is always an option. So yeah, they really do integrate beautifully with other offerings and things that you might have. And the other thing I was going to mention as well is the Akashic records are non-denominational. Can you hear Bella in the background? Um, so no matter what your belief system is, it doesn't contradict anything. So I had one client who was she's very Christian and was like, "Look, I don't want any of your spiritual mumbo jumbo. I just want to work with you and work through this stuff." And I was like, "That is absolutely fine. I don't push any of my stuff on anybody." And she was basically like, "No spirit animal nonsense." And I was like, "Okay, fine, no problem." And but through the work that we did, she gained a belief in some of the stuff I share, and actually ironically strengthened her relationship with God. And so it was interesting, her faith and her religion were actually strengthened through the work we did in the Akashic Records. And I just love that. Like I've yeah, I think that's amazing. And I've worked with other people, and their relationship with Allah has been strengthened through the work of the Akashic Records. I really feel like um it's just a beautiful, positive, pure, higher power and access to our deepest truth. And so it doesn't really matter what your sort of other beliefs are. This stuff is just really pure. That's been my experience thus far, and people that have worked with me. So I just wanted to add that, because I think it can be sometimes a little bit jarring with people, but I'm like, no problem. It's really, it's all fine. Okay, cool. Well, I will put all the links for things in the show notes. If you are interested, or if you have questions, please let me know. More than happy to answer any questions for you. And yeah, see you in the next episode. I think I might have another story for you. We'll see what needs to come through. Take care. Bye.